We break it down, 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 down. She break it down, 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 down. She got a message for the people, a brilliant mind and a clean soul. She's standing up to the evil and making sure that we all grow strong enough to break these chains we in that keep us in this painful condition. She give us truth and a vision. That's why we listen. She break it down, 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 down.
Yes. Welcome back. You are listening to Lurie Daniel Favors here on SiriusXM's Urban View, where talk empowers and becomes action. We have been talking extensively about the election results, the primary that took place last night in Arkansas, Texas, and North Carolina. Shout out to all of the folks on the right side of history who won their races. We've talked extensively about what happened in Texas with Jasmine Crockett. Top line lesson for me is I will never be a day of election day voting again. I will be voting on the first day of early voting because the shenanigans and the craziness that went on in Texas, which frankly, as we heard from a number of Texas voters, was not new. And a number of Texas voters told us that when they went to early vote, there wasn't nobody in them lines. And so the question we had posed was, did black voters or voters for Jasmine Crockett, did they fail her? Because if your theory of the case as a candidate is that you have enough numbers, if people will turn out, if you have enough numbers to actually win and be decisive, and then the people don't come out, chicken versus the egg, which came first? I don't know. Were they properly outreached to? There will be a lot of conversation about this. We've already seen a number of folks who've had comments about things to say about it, but it certainly is that is something that was very instructive, that we must engage in early voting, particularly those of you who are now clear about how different approaches to voting rights protection, like pre-clearance, really do make a difference. So having discussed all of that, I want to shift now to what's been happening internationally. And again, for whatever I don't get to in this segment, you will be able to hear most of this in the podcast later on today. Lurie Breaks It Down is the name of the podcast, which you can get anywhere that you get podcasts. And for those of you watching this on this YouTube, please don't forget to like and subscribe and share the video because we're guiding our algorithms. But I have a question for you. What's the difference between strategic planning and strategic failures, right? Now, if we were to look at definitions from institutions like the Harvard Business School, according to the Harvard Business School, strategic planning is the structured process of defining an organization's long-term vision, mission, and goals, and developing a roadmap to achieve them over a 3 to 5 year horizon. That would be strategic planning. When you are thoughtful, when you are clear-eyed about what your goals are, you have objectives you want to reach, you've got metrics that will let you know if you are approaching those goals. It's a wonderful thing to have a strategic plan. But on the other side of strategic plan are strategic blunders, strategic failures. And when we go again to the Harvard Business School, we see that strategic failure is defined as what happens when an organization fails to set or achieve its core goals, mission, or long-term objectives due to a flawed, unrealistic, or poorly executed high-level plan. It represents a fundamental breakdown in mapping out how to win, often stemming from poor intelligence, lack of adaptability, or misalignment between strategy and day-to-day operations. Now, what does all that have to do with what's happening internationally? I'm so glad that you asked. I am here to break it down for you. After listening to this clip, you let me know, which side do you think we're on? And that's the question for this segment. And the segment, for those of you missing it, is called And Then It All Falls Down. Which side of the strategic planning line do you think the Americans are on? Do you think they're on the side of strategic planning or strategic failure? These are important questions because, baby, by all accounts, this war in Iran, it ain't going so well. Like, it's not going well at all. I want you all to take a listen to this content creator who talks about how the American strategy is backfiring already. And honey, we ain't even a week into this thing. So take a listen to what he has to say about whether or not this is a failure or a success. Let's hear it.
The U.S. is making massive strategic errors. It's going to affect everybody. Here's how. If you're new here, my name is Eric Zulager. I have a degree in national security from a government think tank and another degree from Oxford, and I've spent time living and working in around 47 different countries, including the Middle East. I was also trained as a geopolitical analyst and forecaster, so let's talk about strategy. 3 big errors here, and they're going to cost everybody dearly. The first one is about timelines. Now, it's not being reported, but the U.S. has already invited Iran back to the negotiating table, and they have refused. That is because the U.S. has forced Iran into a longer timeline, while Iran has forced the U.S. into a shorter timeline. Let me explain. The The U.S. attack in June, Midnight Hammer, forced Iran back to the negotiating table. But those negotiations led to the current situation we are in, which is an all-out conflict not only with the United States, but with allies in the region and Europe. So Iran no longer has an incentive to return to the negotiating table. In fact, they have been pushed into all-out war on a longer time frame because they understand that the U.S. has a much shorter time frame. And here's why. The U.S. is using much more expensive precision-guided munitions from a carrier strike group. According to best estimates, those will run out in about a week, week and a half. Meanwhile, Iran is using much cheaper drones to attack U.S. forces and allies. The difference is Iran can keep their attack cadence up while the U.S. cannot. But this gets worse for the U.S. because political capital is going to run out rapidly. Look, around 19% of undecided voters, the ones who will decide the midterms, believe that these strikes are a good thing. A congressional vote is going to come up, which will likely be vetoed. However, all of the Republicans who vote for continued action in Iran will be on record. Independents will decide the midterms. Independents do not like this attack on Iran. That means that the U.S. needs to push for a decisive victory in the next 2 to 4 weeks, but that is not going to happen. Iran is going to continue to play the long game through cost and chaos, both of which are on their side. Here's the other strategic blunder that the U.S. has made. Getting rid of the Ayatollah is not getting rid of the regime. There are 15,000 members of the religious political elite in Iran. Even though new leaders have already come to power and then subsequently been executed, that does not mean that that can go on forever. Targeting operations like that are time-consuming and costly, and the U.S. cannot keep it up even with Israeli support. The Islamic Republic's regime is still intact, and so is the IRGC. Now they have no reason to negotiate and every reason to throw everything they can at the United States and its allies. Here's the final misapprehension, and it's the most dangerous one. Clean regime change is possible. Iran is full of autonomous ethnic areas which will break off and fight against one another. Only 60% is ethnically Persian. Dissolving the state will likely lead to civil war.
Yeah, this is a problem. And he's just outlining the very beginnings of it. That, again, you can follow that content creator at _under_report. And he mentions his name there in the clip. So hopefully you were able to catch that and subscribe to his account if you want more information. But we are also now learning from Reuters and a number of other reports that Donald Trump is going to be, as in has not yet done, going to be reviewing, quote, policy options aimed at controlling energy prices following recent attacks linked to Iran, including a proposal to help oil tankers transiting conflict zones to obtain insurance, according to sources familiar with the matter. Which is to say, he didn't do this before the war started, which is a real problem because typically when you're doing strategic planning, you game all this shit out, son. You don't wait until you done punch the motherfucker to figure out if you can actually carry the weight of the fight. That's ridiculous. But it seems to me that is exactly what has happened. And unfortunately for the Americans, this issue with the munitions is a really big deal. I want y'all to take a listen to this clip. This is by a professor who goes by the handle Predictive History, and he's going to explain to you the difference in costs when it comes to these munitions. And the costs are significant because Iran is able to produce these drones that are able to engage in these strikes to the tune of $20,000 to $50,000 per drone. The interceptors that the Americans need to defeat the drones and to stop them before they land cost $12 million. Oh, and by the way, Iran can produce, a couple hundred of these drones daily, because I didn't know this, but Iran apparently has a whole lot of let me put it this way. Their education is so good that they are in the top 10 of the education rankings, internationally speaking. Their scientists are phenomenal, and they have a really good system in place that allows them to produce the weapons that they need. Not to say that their weapons are bigger than the Americans, but frankly, they don't need to be. Because when you see what they just did to the USS Abraham Lincoln, when you see what they have done to air carriers, honey, they don't need to have the same weapons as the Americans, because there's also this reality that the Americans don't have the same weapons they do. And that's not a game you ever want to be in. Take a listen to Predictive History as he breaks it down.
The Iranians see this as a religious war. And so the Iranians have announced total war. Okay? And so what this means is that right now command and control in Iran is decentralized. There's no one person telling everyone what to do. Every region has its own orders, has its own strategy. And so if you knock out Tehran, everyone else keeps on going. So if you take off the head, it doesn't change anything. Okay? But unfortunately, the Israelis and Americans use this as a military doctrine. Military doctrine just means how you design your military for what purpose. And so, even though the Americans seem like an invincible army, they are not equipped to fight a 21st century war against drones, against destabilization, against religious fanatics. Okay? They're just not. All right? But unfortunately, because of military doctrine, they're going to keep on attacking Tehran. Now, the great irony of all this is that the Iranians who would be most supportive of regime change, are actually in the cities, because they are educated, they're progressive. The people who are most fundamentally against you, will fight you to the death, are religious fanatics, the Shia militants, living in the rural areas. Okay? So this is a really silly thing where you are actually destroying those who will most likely support you, and you're leaving alone those who are most likely to commit jihad against you.
That is a problem. Although in that clip, the other problem I have is that wasn't the clip that I meant, where he talks about the difference in the prices. We'll get to that later. But just know that the way that the drone warfare has basically happened thus far, Iranians are able to launch countless drones that frankly are a part of their older stock, right? And they are very, very cheap to make. And the munitions that the Americans need to block those drones cost way too much money, and there are not enough of them, and they're actually running out of them right now. But you might be thinking, Lurie, you're citing to international sources. Let's think about what's happening here at home. USA. What are the Americans saying? Because that's what we really care about. America first. That's who we are. Well, let's talk about what the Americans are saying. Let's look at what Chris Murphy, one of the senators who has been a part of the conversations about the intel that we in the public are not able to actually have. I want you to take a listen to this clip, because Chris Murphy talks about just how serious things have gotten. Now, every single one of the Democrats that came out of this meeting were very, very concerned. They were more concerned about what they heard after the meeting than they were when the meeting started. Let's take a listen to Chris Murphy in his own words.
This is as serious as it gets. This is war and peace. They told us in that room that there are going to be more Americans that are going to die, that they are not in the short run going to be able to stop these drones that are going to continue to fly into the Middle East. We have to have a debate in the United States Senate on an authorization of military force. It will likely fail. And we shouldn't be voting to proceed to other pieces of legislation until we get a debate on this deeply unpopular, immoral, and illegal war with Iran.
So that's Senator Chris Murphy, but he wasn't the only one that was in that room. And fortunately for us, everybody else who was in the room was saying basically the same thing. And what really was concerning was when Senator Ed Markey acknowledged that y'all's president don't know what the fuck he's doing. Like, this is absolutely completely out of his control. The strategizing ain't strategized, and these people are not at all prepared for this moment. This is not their best moment. They didn't send their best when they sent the people who were trying to plan out this war. I think they sent people who were cracked out. No, coked out. It was definitely cocaine. Take a listen to Senator Ed Markey as he basically says much the same, but in a bit more stark of terminology. Let's hear it.
I just left a classified briefing on Iran, and it only confirmed what we already knew. Donald Trump is waging an illegal war, and he has no plan to end it. Today, he said we attacked Iran because he had a feeling, but we know the truth. Trump is lying about Iran's nuclear capacity. He's lying about Iran's missile capabilities, and he's dragging the United States into another endless war in the Middle East. Trump is completely out of control, and Americans have already lost their lives because of his lies. The war in Iran must end now.
Now, let's talk about that, because what often happens in this country is an American president does something stupid, like starts an illegal war. And then Congress is like, you shouldn't have did that. It was illegal. You can't do that. But then they vote for the shit, right? So if you saying that this is an illegal war, he has no exit plan. And we're now seeing reports from international sources that say up to 50,000 U.S. troops, up to 50,000 U.S. troops are making their way over to Iran. Iran, which is, from my understanding, a mountainous region that has all the munitions capability that it needs to not only make things very uncomfortable for the Israelis, but they have hit every single military base in the region. Every single American military base in the region has now faced direct hit from these drones. The very same drones that Donald Trump told the senators he cannot stop. The Americans don't have the capacity capacity to stop the drones, and you're going to send American soldiers, mainly the white ones, because y'all got rid of all the blacks. Not all, but enough. You're sending mainly white soldiers into a battle with weaponry that you don't have the capacity to sustain. And when I know a lot of y'all thought I was being hyperbolic about the whole book of Revelations thing yesterday. I wasn't. I got the articles, I got the proof, I got the information that you need. But I also have Steve Bannon, someone who I do not like to hear from at all. But Steve Bannon has also entered the chat, because it's not just the Democrats who have something to say. Everybody is kind of clear this shit just got fugazi as hell. Let's hear this conversation on Steve Bannon's podcast.
Brandon, the drafting off that, what Sam said, President Trump has been pretty adamant. Hey, this planning was for 5 weeks. So in the first 24, 48 hours, right, they are going to degrade it somewhat. But he's hit at least the initial plan put forward. They're prepared to stay here 5 weeks. Now, President Trump's always going to leave himself alternatives and be able to do the unpredictable. But do you see that we have the wherewithal to pound at this level for 5 weeks?
No, I think this is one of the worst planned operations I've seen now. I think the president, they may have been telling him, yes, we're planning for a contingency for 5 weeks. But remember, there was a lot of off-ramps built into that 5-week plan. Jack Posobiec was on the first day this war started talking about they had it clear to these planned pauses. We haven't had any pause yet. We are very much in a very high-tempo conflict. And I think that the president and Netanyahu really believed, and I think the president was following Netanyahu's lead on this, that, hey, if you whack Khamenei, the whole regime will fall like a house of cards, because that's what the Israelis think. The Israelis have this assassination mindset. They're crazy about assassinations. And when it works, it works. But when it doesn't, you now have a situation where you've kicked over the hornet's nest and all the hornets are coming after you and your friends. And it turns out you don't have enough stuff to whack them down. And so I think that, I'm hopeful the Americans will adapt like the Iranians have done in the next iteration. But right now, I think this is a very badly planned operation. Well, and I think that the president should declare victory now and come home and say, hey, I took care of the problem. It's over.
Let's pause it. Do you see how they just switch reality? You getting your ass handed to you. And he's like, let's just declare victory and go. We killed the main guy. Never mind the fact that the main guy has now been replaced completely. The entire government that was assassinated and unalived has been replaced. But he's talking about, and the Americans are talking about the Iranians as if the Iranians are engaged in some religious warfare, as if we do not have articles from this country entitled, quote, military commander tells troops bombing Iran is part of God's divine plan. One commander had a big grin on his face while saying Donald Trump has been anointed by Jesus to light the signal fire in Iran. Y'all talking about they having a religious warfare when you are being led by a man. Peter's own mama said he's trash, or is he drunk, or is he coked out? Hegseth has got tattoos on his body talking about God wills. He has written books talking about holy war as a good thing in terms of policy. And they're the religious zealots. Really? And we now have articles that are talking about the fact that, wait a minute, and a number of commentators have pointed out, wait a minute, if you really do believe that this is the war that is going to start Armageddon, isn't the person who start Armageddon the Antichrist? That's the Antichrist. And so for those of you who are interested in this thing, I don't have time to do it right now, but in the podcast, I go through a list of claims that the Bible makes about how you will know who the Antichrist is. And it just so happens Donald Trump tracks. He tracks on all of them. We don't have time to get into that right now. But what we do need to talk about is the way these weapons are kicking ass. And by ass, I mean American ass. And this is not like everybody in my family who could serve has served except me. And I did not serve because I am fundamentally opposed to military operations. I'm opposed to military for empire. And frankly, I would have got kicked out or arrested or something else if I had been in the military, if I joined the military. So this is not to say there's no joy in this, but you started a war with lies. You were wrong about it. And you have already purged so much of the military from the people who were qualified, who would have told you, you ain't going to have no 5-week situation like this. We did this before. You got Peter's own mama say he's trash. Hegseth telling you that it's going to be 5 weeks. But you all take a listen to some of the reporting that is coming out from the Middle East. We have this report from CNN I want to pull this up, talking about the largest U.S. military installation in the Middle East was struck. They literally took out the eyes of the Americans when it came to their ability to see the weapons that are coming in, so much so that now Americans are basically fighting blind. And I would say Israelis, but where the Israelis at? Anybody seen them? I ain't seen them. I don't know. Are they here? What's happening? Because Tel Aviv also getting his ass handed to him, so much so that when international reporters are showing up to sites in Israel where there has been bombing, Israeli soldiers are showing up within minutes telling them to stop filming because they don't want you to see the destruction that the Iranians are implementing as against Israel. Take a listen to this quick clip from CNN just describing one of the targets that was hit in the Middle East. Let's hear it.
Has struck Al Udeid Air Base, as I said, the biggest American base in the region. We don't know much more. No casualties reported as of yet. Again, we don't know what we don't know, but we do know they are saying it was a ballistic missile. It's obviously a significant development. And as that is coming in, we are learning that the CIA is also working to trigger some sort of an uprising inside of Iran. Now, this is a major and potentially explosive development in the war. So let me tell you what we know here with these breaking details.
Let's actually pause
Multiple
it there,
people
just because
familiar.
for time's sake, I want to move on and get to some of the other things. Let's talk about the CIA really quickly. And again, I take more of my time in the podcast. You guys can hear this much more extensively there. But we are also learning that the CIA's one of their largest installations, their station in Saudi Arabia, in the capital of Saudi Arabia, also struck by Iranian drone warfare. Okay, now, to be clear, I do have a little bit of an I told you so about this because, frankly, I'm a little snarky and I'm a little petty, and you all know this. But when it comes to the realities that we're facing today, this was not only predictable, it was predicted. They said they was going to do this in Project 2020. This is the thing. But as this content creator noted, you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. Let's hear, Amina, from this brother who goes by, hold on, let me pull up the names. I want to make sure I'm calling people's names correctly. Ebony Warrior Studios 1. Take a listen to what they said about this fallout.
So breaking news, apparently that radar that Iran hit, the one that covered most of the Middle Eastern region, apparently taking that out did, in fact, blind the U.S. and Israel. This morning, Iran sent a missile barrage that was untouched by the Iron Dome. Absolutely mollywhopping Tel Aviv.
Yeah, boy.
I want to remind you that Iran has been preparing for this for a very long time, and they're also not using their big shit yet. They're using their cheapo stuff. And the United States and Israel walked into, they overplayed their hand. Israel and the United States are so used to being pushovers to everyone, being able to get their way through murder, genocide, force, in everything. Iran was ready for it. Iran has been for decades at this point, has been watching what the U.S. and Israel has been doing in the region. And they've been preparing for this shit. They have not started using their big shit yet.
Nope.
Like their arsenal of hypersonic missiles and stuff like that. Those are untouchable, essentially, by the Iron Dome system.
Let's pause it there. Those hypersonic missiles that he referenced, America don't have that. They don't have that. And them hypersonic missiles, boy, they be hypersonic in chat. They really, really do. But as you heard him say there, the CIA station in Saudi Arabia was struck by the Iranian drone forces, the very same Iranian drones that the Americans told their senators and their congressional representatives they do not have the capacity to stop. They do not have the capacity to stop. And then you got Pete, his own mama said he's trash. Is he high on coke? Is he drunk? We don't know. Hegseth talking about you all, only the liberals want to know how long this is going to take. It could be 2 weeks. It could be 10 weeks. It could be 5 weeks. It could be 40 weeks. That's not a direct quote, but that's basically what he was saying. And I do believe he had to be coked out, either coked out, a combination of crack, coke, drunk. I don't know what it was, but this is how they're all. When I tell you, I thought 9/11 and the response to 9/11 was bad. This is so much worse. At least the people who were doing evil in the response to 9/11 were and lying about the wars and whatnot. At least they were competent liars. Like that we don't have competent liars right now. And quite frankly, we now know from all the reports that every single U.S. base in the Iranian region has been essentially bumped up And in fact, you know what? Y'all not going to believe me when I say it. I know y'all not going to believe it. So let me just have the words of a former Army colonel. Army colonel, let's get his name because I want to make sure that everybody's clear. This ain't what Lurie said. I'm just reporting to you what the people them said. This is U.S. Army Colonel Douglas McGregor talking with Matt Gaetz on OAN, which is not a left-leaning news outlet at all. Take a listen to this conversation as he outlines just how brutally the Americans bundled this up. Let's hear it.
China and Russia are sitting on the sidelines monitoring everything. They're in close touch with the government. They're providing satellite intelligence, which accounts for some of the tremendous successes, particularly in Israel and on our U.S. bases. All of our bases have been destroyed. Our harbor installations are destroyed. We're actually having to fall back on India and Indian ports, which are less than ideal. That's what the Navy says. And I think Iran, much to our disappointment, is faring very, very well.
Sucks, don't it? Ain't as much fun when the rabbit got the gun. I know it's hard to understand, but essentially we are now in a situation where the weapons supply has diminished so low that y'all's president is now ordering weapons manufacturers to meet with him at the White House on Friday because they didn't do that before launched the war. Meet with him at the White House on Friday so that they are going to be able to pressure them to increase their war machine making. So it's which is a process that takes a really long time to ramp up. You can't just plop in and say, oh, I want more weapons, and then just all of a sudden spit out a whole bunch more weapons at the end. It takes supply chains. It takes materials, supply chains and materials that the Americans don't really have access to because of y'all's president's tariffs. Y'all's president's tariffs. Now, I'm not going to get a chance to talk about this right now, but in the podcast, I do talk about this whole connection to what's happening with the military and the weapons and the fact that they don't have enough, and this effort to meet with the manufacturers for military weapons in the White House, because basically what's happening is Donald Trump is saying to them, if you don't increase your output, we're going to put you on a list of folks that no longer are reliable and no longer are able to get government contracts. The very same thing that they did to Anthropic. Remember that? So the same pressure that they put on Anthropic, basically nationalizing their program, is the same pressure they're now putting on military personnel. Now, in the podcast, I talk about the fact that this is now sending shockwaves through the tech community, because what they have realized in the tech community is that if you tell everybody we're going to get rid of all your entry level jobs when it comes to the technology that we're unleashing, this artificial intelligence, and ain't nobody got a solution for that, and the Democrats and Republicans can't agree on nothing except for the fact that your industry needs to be controlled, they're now worried that their success at pushing artificial intelligence the way that they have, and this is said by the head of Palantir, Mr. Karp himself, head of Palantir, they are now concerned that their industry will get nationalized as well. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes, but that's what it is. In the podcast, which I don't have time to do today, we also talk about the fact that there are so many Americans who were left stranded. While other nations are helping their citizens come home, the Americans were told, if you call the State Department's number, it's an automated message that says, doo-doo-doo, you have reached a number that is not in service. I'm kidding. That ain't what it say. But it basically says, we can't help you. We ain't got nothing for you. Sorry. We at war, and there's not going to be any planes for you. Although the Republicans were able to use what I understand, Air Force personnel and aircraft to get MAGA influencers out of Dubai. It's so sweet. It's so sweet. But they weren't able to get actual Americans out. There are thousands of Americans now stranded all across the region, posting about their difficulties getting home. And essentially, they have been abandoned by their government, much the way we have been abandoned here. And as Senator Andy Kim had noted in response to this report, he says, I worked at the State Department before, and the safety of Americans overseas is the highest responsibility. Warnings to citizens to evacuate 3 days into a war when airspace is closed is a clear sign of zero strategy and planning by the Trump administration. Now Americans have limited options. But my ultimate question, which I posed yesterday and the day before, was why? Why now? And we talked about a whole lot of reasons. It's, distraction from the Jeffrey Epstein files. We talked about the fact that, they're losing here at home. Nobody likes what they're saying. And all of that might be true. But then leave it to a black woman. I came across this video where Lukman Nation 1 had some things to say. And this is a person who's, black people are undefeated. The analysis provided here makes it so clear that, Epstein, losing, bad policies. But it's really because this is who America is. Let's take a listen.
Can we please stop saying this man bombing countries is a distraction from the Epstein files? They don't give a fuck, man. They don't give a fuck about us knowing what they do. Because we have also told you that these kinds of things, child sex trafficking, child rape, child murder, even cannibalizing children, what do y'all think the slave owners were doing to our ancestors? What do you think they were doing to those little indigenous girls and women? Do you think they just killed all those people? No, there was mass rape, there was child rape, mass murder, and yes, even cannibalism. So I understand that's a shocking thing for y'all, but that's history. This man bombing Iran is not a distraction from the Epstein files. The bombing of Iran, the kidnapping of Maduro and Syria from Venezuela, the starving of Cuba, the genocide in Palestine, the funding of the genocide in Congo, the unrest in Sudan, the attacks and the threats against the AES, and every other imperialist invasion and occupation and aggression toward another country, that is U.S. policy under every administration, regardless of whatever weird scandal a particular president may bring in. This is the policy. And it was the policy before Trump and the Epstein files, and unless we change this system, it will remain the policy, regardless of who ends up in that building after this pig.
After this pig. That was a mic drop. She is correct. We can blame it on Epstein file cover up. We can blame it on the fact that they're not doing well at home. But this is who the Americans are. This is the type of nation. This is the only type of nation that could be the byproduct of mass genocide, land theft, and human trafficking, also known as the enslavement of Africans. The only place that this nation could have ended with them white nationalists, those white narcissists in power, is right here. And so because of that, we've got now questions about how many wounded are actually out there. I actually posed this on Threads yesterday, and I was asking the international community, what are you seeing in your local media about casualties as a result of this? Because I don't believe it's just 6 Americans that have lost their lives. And the reason I don't believe that is because we've seen job postings on sites like Indeed, which I talk about in the podcast, that are basically hiring for people to receive the bodily remains of soldiers. They're hiring non-military personnel to work who have expertise in mortuary sciences, who have expertise in dealing with the bodies and the remains of those who are dearly departed. And I'd asked the folks on Threads, I was like, what are you seeing in your local media? And a number of you responded and you said, well, I follow BBC, I follow Al Jazeera. I said, no. Those are international media sites. I'm talking about local news, hyper-local news, because what we're seeing is that there are way more American casualties than we are being told. And finally, as again, I talk about more of that in the podcast, I just want to also say yesterday, one last thing that just happened, I'm going to squeeze this in the few minutes that we have. I during the blackout here in New York City, I was in law school. And I came out the law school building and I happened to see your friend. Shout out to you, Angela. And she said, hey, the lights are out. And I noticed that the lights at the intersection where we were standing had gone out. And that was my introduction to learning that the entire New York City had basically been placed under a blackout. And I said to her, oh, snap, let me go to the bank so I can pull out some money. And Angela goes, Lurie, you can't get money. Money is electronic. There's no money. You can't get any money because the banks are closed. She gives me $20, and I'll never thank God for her, because had she not given me that $20, I had no cash. We learned yesterday, and I was reminded of that story yesterday when I saw a notice that the Federal Reserve had a lot of trouble with their ACH transactions yesterday. Did you know that the Amazon data center got struck in Dubai? And there are a number of data centers and key infrastructure touch points that have been struck. They had a notice from the Federal Reserve, not from your mom and pop's bank, from a Federal Reserve, talking about the fact that thousands were impacted as the Federal Reserve faced transaction delays. I need y'all to save your money. I need you to have some fireproof place to store your money and to save your money, because it's about to get really, really bad. Abu Dhabi's commercial bank, the third largest lender by assets in UAE, was also hit by an IT disruption. It's about to get so much worse before it gets better. Luckily for us, we have each other. Luckily for us, we're building community. Luckily for us, we know how fugazi these motherfuckers are, and we are doing what is necessary to build out our ability to not just survive this, but to thrive on the other side. I'm going to hold it here now and leave it there. Well, I have to. We're at the end of the show. The podcast will be out later on today. We'll go into much more in depth about this. Those of you who are part of my online platform, Sankofa Connections, I'll be with you all in the after show breakdown in just a little bit. I got to do some more finalizing to the podcast, so I'll be with y'all for the after show breakdown in just a few minutes. But listen, do the work, build community, grow some shit. Okay, separate yourself from dependency on this system. Have some cash on hand, lots of cash on hand in a fireproof, protected space, because it's about to get very, very, very interesting. And far be it from us to believe that we as Americans are the only ones on the planet who would not have to suffer the negative outcomes of really bad leadership's really bad decisions. Between now and tomorrow, I need all of you to figure out how your purpose aligns with the needs of our people. Walk in it with your back straight. I need you to tap into your Harriet Tubman, Marcus Garvey, Nat Turner love, so you learn to love us harder than you were taught not to. Learn to create pathways of opportunity for those who need it, and learn to uphold and defend the sanctity of our lives. And then finally, good people, as I say to you at the conclusion of every single show, find as many good things as you possibly